So welcome to our business leadership discussion today. We're excited to have you here. This is a feature that CCBF puts on each month to support the biblical leadership principle being taught and being presented in our biz groups across Canada. And so now today we have this opportunity. Today our presentation is by Pete Baran. And Pete's a wonderful friend. He's the chairman of the board for Canadian Christian Business Federation, has done a great job in giving us leadership over the last number of years. But Pete is really known as Alberta's business mechanic and is the owner of Blue Neck Consulting. Pete now coaches, advises, and teaches business owners how to transition from doing to leading. He has a degree in commerce from the University of British Columbia and a certificate in high performance leadership from Cornell University. As has been indicated, he's based in Calgary and is a welcome partner in the whole ministry of CCBF. So let's just begin with a word of prayer, and then we'll let Pete get started. Father, we thank you today for the privilege is ours to have Pete share with us from his heart and from your word and from his experience all about the power of purposeful teams. Lord, I pray that as Pete makes his presentation, that you'll open our ears and hearts to hear those things that you want us to take away and to apply to our various workplaces. Lord, we thank you for the privilege it's ours to be called your children and to be present in this meeting today. We pray we'll sense your presence throughout this time together. The Lord, it will ultimately lead to all of your purposes being fulfilled for each of our lives. For it's in your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you for being here. Don asked me about 6 weeks ago to do a talk about building teams, and it's something that I've had a lot of experience having had to do multiple times because I keep in my career I've changed jobs a lot, had to build teams, but also in the consulting business, one of the biggest issues people have is how to build healthy and productive teams. And so we've had to deal with that for many years now with many clients across Canada. I'm going to share with you 6 key elements that I've discovered or observed at least that believe create really great teams that trust each other and are capable of doing really extraordinary work. So the first one of that is talking about values. Let me take a moment to say that strong teams need values as the bedrock of everything that they do. And ethical values are even better. And I say that partly tongue in cheek because every organization, every team has some values. They're not always shared and they're not always healthy. So when I talk about values, I'm going to talk about it from a Christian perspective and talk about ethics a little bit. Um, I think that my philosophy has been that ethics in the Bible doesn't just lie in the hundreds of different rules laid out in the Old Testament, but I focus more on what Jesus described in Matthew 23:27 to 28, where he called out the Pharisees to stop being whitewashed tombstones. I think what I look for in Jesus's teachings in Matthew is that Jesus wants us to act with love and compassion for God and for one another. And I think that forms the strongest foundation for ethical values in any team, love for God and love for one another. I'm going to switch for a second into a more secular perspective that actually lines up with this. And in his essays on ethics in 1841, philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer observed that ethical behavior doesn't seem to flow from logic and fairly consistently. And that's kind of like what Jesus was saying about being whitewashed tombstones. Following the rules and acting logically with the rules didn't always result in ethical behavior. But ethics come from compassion for others. Schopenhauer said that when we see a frail person drop their groceries on the ground, we want to help them, even when it doesn't necessarily benefit us, because we can feel what they feel and we can empathize with them. Shocking that Schopenhauer discovered this in 1841 and won a Nobel Prize for this, and yet Jesus said that over 2,000 years ago. And as Christians, we need to describe values in ways that others can feel and connect with. And if we fail to do that, I think we're just failing. We're just inscribing our own mottos on our own whitewashed tombstones. And so, this is what I think we need to do when we're trying to build a sense of core values in our teams. And doing that is just not easy. You know, as a consultant, I seldom get to work with some of the best people in my clients. I'm dealing with people that are often quite broken. In one memorable project that I had to do, I was assigned resources from four competitors who were actively trying to sabotage each other and the client. And I had to get these four different companies to work together as a team. And we needed to support and work together. Otherwise, that project was just never going to happen. So if take a look at Galatians 6:2 about bearing one another's burdens. And out of that, I developed a simple motto that was based on that, which says one team, one win. And then I started enforcing that in the team. And in a really short amount of time, the animus kind of fell away and they decided to start getting to know each other a little bit better and starting to help each other with their challenge their respective challenges on the project, and of which there were many. At the conclusion of the project, they all became each other's best friends. And by the way, these weren't Christian people. They were people from all over the world of various religions or non-religions, and yet God's values of bearing one another's burdens made a huge difference in their lives. And it demonstrates that God's teaching can work for people if they are embraced, and even if they're not lived by non-Christians. So when you're building a team, we often don't have the blessing of having all strong Christians on our team, but having strong Christian values that people connect with and can empathize with and can empathize with each other, I think creates a really good, strong foundation of a good, high functioning team. So the next one I want to talk about is purpose. I think in us, God has created a compelling need to do something important, that we need to all be on mission. You know, I look at younger people that are working in my clients, and many of them are rudderless and looking for something that means something in their day, that they're just not turning up and doing a job and going home. I watch really talented people quit jobs, good paying jobs, because it doesn't fulfill them. It doesn't have any meaning for them. So I think the second key thing is having a really strong purpose in the team that isn't just a goal. It's a reason to do something. And reason can be very transformative to people's lives and the people that they impact. We all, as leading and forming teams, I think we all have to answer one really simple question. Why me and why we? You know, and it isn't just, and in business, we often say, well, we're trying to grow and have a healthy business. Of course, but that isn't a purpose. A purpose is, why am I going to come to work and give my very best for something? It has to mean something. Like, you've probably all heard of the two friends who built an internet search tool a bunch of years ago to make the world's knowledge accessible to everybody. And they called it Google. These guys didn't start off and said, hey, we want to do a cool tech project and become billionaires. They had a purpose. They believed that access to the world's information was a worthy cause. It was a purpose. And that purpose attracted a lot of people around them. Probably also heard of the cartoonist who believed that dreams could come true, and his name was Walt Disney, or the person who saw the entire world coming together under relationship with God, called Jesus. But I'll bet you haven't heard about these guys. And if you have, I'm sorry to tell you the story again, but There was a minor league baseball team in the southern United States called the Savannah Cardinals, who were a farm team of the Cardinals, but they were having a bunch of problems. They were a pretty unremarkable farm team, as many farm teams were. So you look at it and say, well, didn't they have a purpose? Yeah, their job was to go out and play good baseball games and win some, and hopefully some of them would be called up to the majors. Yawn. They only qualified for postseason play 8 times and won the championship 5 times in their 31-year history. They didn't do too bad. Their average fan attendance was under 3,500 fans per game. So pretty unremarkable type of team. Occasionally making the playoffs, occasionally winning the championship, most of the time not. In 2016, they were rebranded as the Savannah Bananas. Has anybody heard of those guys? Andrew's nodding, right? So they became a barnstorming league and repurposed the whole team under the motto fans first, entertainment always. Very different purpose. Their purpose was to entertain the fans and to really make them feel like they were getting a great experience when they came to watch a game. So they added this fun aspect to their A-level ball play, and they started playing by a slightly different version of the rules called, and they call it banana ball. They even signed a pitcher that bats and pitches on stilts. Now, that whole fun aspect didn't take away from the fact that they played a very high level of baseball, but they did it with a high level of entertainment. And they had a lot of fun, and they attracted a lot of people who had a lot of fun. Not only did they attract a bunch of players who came to the team to enjoy the game of baseball and have some fun with people. Last month they had a record attendance. Instead of their average 3,500 people per game, they packed the Clemson football stadium in South Carolina with 81,000 people. 81,000 people. Which just goes to show that a compelling purpose can change something unremarkable into something phenomenal. So if you have a team and you haven't re-examined your purpose, I would encourage you to do so and look for a purpose that isn't causing people to fall asleep at your meeting table, but a purpose that says, this is big and exciting, and this is something that we want to be part of. The third thing I want to talk about is creating differences. Corinthians 12:1 says, just as the body, though one, has many parts, means that we can all become part of the same team and pursue the same purpose, even if we contribute according to our talents and capabilities in different ways. A very common mistake that people make when they're building teams is they tend to put together people that are most like themselves, people who seem to fit. We all do it. There's a psychological reason behind it, and that is that we are naturally drawn to people that are like ourselves. And the reason that is goes back to genetic survivalism, which is if they're most like ourselves, they're probably not a threat. Now, that's not always true, and we know that. But, at a subconscious level, that's kind of how the default wiring works. But everybody wants people who can not only are like themselves because of that, but because of some basic flawed version of what a team looks like. So many of my clients that are out there want to have people who are, when you really boil it down, just assistants. People that can do whatever that they can do pretty much the same way that they do it, and that they can delegate stuff to, and it's like dealing with a clone of themselves. And so when people build teams, they naturally tend to build teams of clones. But that's not what building a team is about. If you take a look at the Savannah Bananas or any baseball team, you can't build a team of just pitchers or catchers or batters. You have to have a variety of skills on the team for the team to function, which means you need to involve people in your team who can and want to do what you can't or don't want to do. I'll say that again. You've got to involve people on your team who can do things and will want to do things that you can't do very well or don't want to do very well because it's not something you enjoy. And that diversity of the team, the creating the differences in different people, creates both the beauty of a really high functioning team, but also some of the challenges because you now have to deal with how to work with people that are different. Some of the things that we want to talk about is, embedded in a company that I'm dealing with right now. Client in Toronto running a growing engineering firm. And the owner realized that although the caliber of work that their small team was doing was really good, the business itself was not doing very well. It was not really well organized, and it was demanding a lot of time of the owner doing things that she hated doing, like finance and billing and marketing and a whole bunch of other stuff. She could do it. Master's degree from the U of T, very brilliant person, clearly capable, but these things weren't being done very well because she hated doing them. More importantly, it was exhausting. And she never imagined that somebody else might actually enjoy doing the parts of the work that she hated doing. And once that light bulb went on, when she started to realize that she was seeing things through only her own lens, that there were people that were very different from her and that she needed them, she went out and hired a process and admin team, a couple of people that took over a large swath of the work that she was just loathing doing. And those two people were so happy to get that work and just loved it and worked together and have been doing amazing things with the business. And now the owner gets to do a lot more things that she loves to do. And the business itself is running a lot better. When, you know, when you look at it, it's going back to right to the top here, which is Corinthians 12:1. The body, though one, has many parts. And that invitation was for so many different people with different talents and capabilities and backgrounds and even religious beliefs to come into the church. Why wouldn't that advice be good for inviting people into your team? If you're involved in the church and you want to learn how to attract more congregants to your church, invite a wider variety of sinners, because that's what Jesus did. Okay? So inviting people in of differences is a really key aspect of building a really healthy functioning team, not continuing to attract people that are like yourself. Fourth item is we're going to talk about is discernment. I've learned sometimes the hard way that leading is not by simply forming a team and telling them what to do. It's more nuanced than that. And I've learned that it's some, not all, but some of the little things that matter in achieving the big things. We've often heard don't sweat the small things, just focus on the big things. Well, I've learned that there are, in fact, some small things that you must pay attention to in a team in order to accomplish the big things. And that requires discernment. For example, recognizing how each person in your team can best contribute and what they really need individually for them to be successful at contributing requires discernment. It requires paying attention to the little things in the people in your team to understand them and not just treat them as interchangeable work units. You know, and it's about how to make difficult decisions when there's no consensus in the team. Both are requiring some application of discernment. So let's kind of talk a little bit about on the people side, and I'll give you one example. If you overestimate what somebody on your team can do, you are likely setting a really good person up to fail and potentially putting the whole mission of the team at risk. About half of all of the workers today, half of them are reporting some level of burnout at work, exhaustion and anxiety from trying to meet their employer's expectations and knowing that they are probably falling short of it. That's when you haven't applied enough discernment to know what it is you can ask of them and what help they need to be successful. On the other side of it, you can maybe have people on your team that you are underestimating. And you can have both types on your team. And if you underestimate, you're really going to miss a huge opportunity to see what they are truly capable of and watch them blossom. Jesus himself invited the most unlikely of people to become his apostles and to carry God's mission to the whole world. But in them, he saw some potential that he knew that with God's support would not let him down. I once took a chance on a completely unqualified, broke single dad to work for me, who eventually rose to becoming the vice president of a multi-billion-dollar Canadian tech company. When I hired him, everybody thought I was nuts. He didn't know the industry. He had no skills for the industry. Why was I hiring him? On paper, he was a terrible fit, but I saw in him some potential. And we provided him with support, with guidance, with the ability to do it. And he was hungry and motivated, and he did a fantastic job. The key thing is he was invited into that role. So I think if you're going to bring in different people and find out what they're capable of, is to always invite them into the task. Don't just assign it. And ensure that they have the support that they need to be able to be successful at that task. So they don't let themselves and they don't let you and they don't let the team down. You know, and when making different difficult decisions, God always invites us to lean into him. And we all know that, I think, if we're on this call. And I found that in my own prayers, I'm going to give you a little insight as to what I do. Do what works for you. But for me, what I find is that my own prayers are more easily answered when I'm dealing with difficult decisions on my team, when I reconsider what the core values are that God has given us and how they have applied to the team and how I apply that to the purpose of and mission of the team. So I always give it to God with that context, and and the answer that comes back, I always make sure I filter through Galatians 4:22-23, which is the fruits of the Spirit. So if the result of my actions and decisions are likely to be consistent with them, which is love, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, then I know I'm hearing from God. And I think the best discernment comes from hearing from God who knows all things. The next item here is talking about how do you lead people in a team. There are countless books written on this topic and articles, and I'm just going to give you a couple of ideas that you may not have heard before, and hopefully it gives you some new ideas. I'm going to start with kind of an observation I made a long time ago. There are really three types of people in any team in any organization. There are those who want to lead the parade. Those that are happy to march along, and those people that don't like parades at all. And most businesses and most business people look for leaders among the people who are near the front of the parade, or at least are sitting on some of the best floats. The natural assumption is, you know, more frequently wrong. Some of the best leaders are not the people that are pushing to be the front of the parade or even sit on the best floats. Because as the Bible has shown us time and time again, God often picks the most unremarkable people to do his most remarkable work. It is a great, great lesson that God gives us repeatedly in the Bible. So here's kind of the thinking on this behind not necessarily looking for the front of the parade or the best floats to pick the people that are be on your team. And it comes from a perspective of leadership that says that leadership is not a reward or a privilege that enables you to step up into a better job, more power, more pay, more prestige. For if you hold this belief of leadership, it leads to the concept of self-service, selfishness, and entitlement. I don't know about you, but I look at a large number of the very public CEOs out there and political leaders with shame because this is exactly what they believe leadership is: power, privilege, prestige, pay, and not service. Leadership, I think, is instead a responsibility that you step into that enables others to effectively contribute to the mission. Because if this is your attitude and belief in leadership, it leads to a heart of humility and it leads to a heart of service, which God demands of all of our leaders. So, understanding that leadership is not about getting to the front of the parade, but it is about enabling other people to create the parade. And when you're looking for leadership on your team, you're looking for people who can enable others to create the parade. Encouragement. This is such an incredibly powerful thing on any team because nobody can persevere for very long without some encouragement. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 calls us upon it to encourage one another and build one another up. It does not say to criticize others' work or discourage their efforts. However, so often in teams we find ourselves in position where we need to correct errors and misdeeds and fix poor work. So how do we resolve what God calls us to do with the need to step in and correct? Well, first of all, the Bible really doesn't give us permission to ignore these things, but it does tell us how to address them. It tells us in Galatians 6:1 to do that in private and with the intention to restore the person gently. People on teams will fall short and they'll make mistakes. It does not give us permission to criticize their work and discourage their efforts. Encouragement is the only thing that creates a high performance team, not whacking people across the back of the head with every mistake they make. The if you're going to encourage as well, unlike the criticism that you do in private, I always encourage people to praise in public. In my management coaching process, it's probably the most powerful and yet the most difficult thing that most people in charge of teams, in charge of businesses have to do. Most of them are absolutely terrible at it. And there are reasons for for them having difficulties, and they come honestly. I had one guy that was so second generation business. He had taken it over from his father. His father never encouraged him, and he learned to work hard in the business without much encouragement. And so he never thought it was something he had to give to his staff and to his management. So there's three things that I find that prevent people from freely giving encouragement. And I challenge you that if you're not great at giving encouragement, check yourself on one of these three things. One of them is just plain ego. If I give encouragement to others, then I might not feel as superior to them as I'd like to feel. Check your ego. Second thing is there's a fear of giving praise, because if you praise others publicly, there's a fear that you're creating a threat to your own job. So many employees are so insecure in their position that when they lead and they become managers, that they don't want to praise others because they might get promoted and they may take over their job. If that's true, then you have to check the sense of security and trust that you have in the environment that you've created. If there's fear, that's not healthy. The third thing is reciprocity. Reciprocity is the concept that I'm not giving um, support because I'm not getting any support. I'm not going to encourage because, you know, I'm not getting encouragement. I've had to do it all myself the hard way. Everybody under me needs to do it the same way. That's really unfortunate because giving encouragement is a beautiful and powerful gift that you give to other people. It should not be a transactional thing. You know, when God talks about us loving one another, it also means giving freely these beautiful gifts without the expectation of return. Encouragement shouldn't be a transactional thing. None of these are valid excuses under God. He simply calls upon us to encourage and build one another up. And encouragement is probably the single most powerful fuel for creating a higher performing team. So ask yourself with your own teams, when was the last time that instead of correcting somebody that was not on track with what needed to be done, instead you caught somebody doing something right and praised them for it? My guess is you're probably doing a lot more criticizing than you are encouraging. Those are six core values, core things here. The value of the team, a clear, compelling purpose, bringing people with differences together in the team rather than consistent uniformity, applying discernment on the little things that are important, which includes really recognizing what the individual in the team needs, providing leadership, which is not a reward and power, but leadership is a responsibility to help others create the parade. And last but not least, creating an environment of encouragement, even when people are doing things wrong, are six key elements that I would encourage anyone building a really effective team to consider. Because what it does is these core elements create what's called intrinsic motivation. It isn't the motivation of money. It's not the motivation of financial reward or promotion. It's an intrinsic reward of, I want to do a good job because I believe in what we are doing. And it also creates a trusting environment amongst the team that will bust through walls and accomplish amazing and extraordinary things. This is not easy to do. It takes an investment of time. But every time I've done it myself and I've been able to convince my clients to do it, it has been well worth it. So thank you everybody for listening, and I appreciate it. I'd like to throw it open to some questions and answers at this point.
That's right. Thank you, Pete. That's an excellent presentation. Gave us lots of food for thought. This is a beautiful overview of the power in a purposeful team. So now, yeah, let's open up for questions, comments. Maybe you have a story of your own you want to share that illustrates one of Pete's points. Feel free to do that right now.
I can start. I don't really have any questions, but I do want to say that I really appreciate the layout of your presentation. I, for one, can say that I do fall short on the differences aspect of it. I consistently try to pair people up based on, you know, their likeness of each other instead of their differences. So that's been food for thought, something that I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna reevaluate how I, try to build up my teams.
Absolutely. And it creates a bit of a challenge in that there's not a natural connection that people have because they're different. It takes a little bit of work to create that environment. What I also find, Kim, is that as a leader in your organization, is to start to create an environment and that explicitly says, look, we're going to start to put together teams of people that have different skills, capabilities, and perspectives, and let them know up front that what you're going to do is intentional. And you say, look, that sometimes means you're going to be dealing with people that you wouldn't have picked out of a crowd to be your best friend initially, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be a great coworker with you if you give each other a chance. And so ask for their permission to give that a chance, and that I find helps to move the process along a little more smoothly.
Yeah, that's an interesting take too. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Pete, it's Dean here. I had to laugh when you were talking about, just with encouragement. I had a previous employer that said, don't give them too much positive praise because then they're going to want more money. This was about 15 years ago. I was working and that's, I think that can be something that employers can get caught up in too. And yeah, that may be a reality, but I have a question about so I'm on a new team. We're working towards implementing our strategic plan at MEDA, and I'm wondering, all of us are very new to each other because we're coming from different divisions. And as far as when you have newer teams working together, any practical examples or ideas on how to create some of that team harmony synergy?
Tons.
Okay.
I'll offer two that I find are some of my go-tos. One of them is to recognize that when you're bringing a team together, there's there's an old saying that says people form, they storm, they norm, and perform. Have you ever heard that one before?
Nope. Haven't heard
So
that.
it basically says that there are four stages for for a team to go through, and the more you recognize they're going to happen and shepherd them through it to the last stage, it's going to take some effort. So forming, people come together, and everybody kind of sizes everybody up, and then there's a storming process. Storming means everybody's got elbows up and trying to figure out how they're going to fit in and how they want to fit into that team. And so there are no expectations that are clear at that point, and the team starts to kind of develop some conflict in each other, and that's normal. And conflict is not a bad thing. If if you look at it as as the intention behind it is, I need to develop some clarity of how this team is going to work. And so conflict is the process by which people develop that understanding. As a leader, recognizing that you can do a number of things to ask questions, to get dialogue going, provide role clarity, provide clear missions, so that people can move that through that process of uncertainty and conflict much more quickly. Then there's the norming phase, which is, okay, we're now starting to develop what we can expect of each other, how this team is going to work, how often we're going to meet, how those meetings are going to go, what I can expect of the person next to me. And as a leader, you can help shepherd that process along very quickly as well. Recognizing that those are the 3 steps before you get to a performing team. We often assume that we can skip those 2 steps because they're great people, they got great experiences, they got great skills, they've been selected because of their capabilities. We'll just throw them in a room and they'll just magically work together, right? And when you say it out loud, it sounds insane, but that's kind of our working assumption. So understanding the form, storm, norm, perform model helps you consciously move through those stages more rapidly. The other thing to recognize about teams and in the differences side is there are many, many different ways to look at differences. And one of the things that creates dysfunction is not recognizing that everybody has a different perspective of work and of the work they're being asked to do. And they have natural inclinations of how they approach it in a team. There are people that are really good with data and facts. And they're always going to be pushing for, well, where's the evidence of this? Right? Where is this coming from? So they need to know where the information is and what the information is. There are people who are really good at throwing 1,000 ideas out an hour. They're great idea generators. We have somebody that we've worked with at the CCBF who's one of those people. And we joke about it and they're aware of it. And that's what their great value is in the team. They generate 1,000 ideas. Don't expect anybody to implement all of them or any of them. Just here's some ideas. There are people on the team that are really, really good at critical thinking, to look at those ideas and say, okay, I don't think these are going to work because we haven't thought about this, or here's the problem, or here's a blocker, or here's where we don't have enough resources, or here where there's not enough time, or here's where we don't know what we're doing. And that's a critical role on the team as well, because somebody has to actually ask those hard questions. Otherwise, you might go down a path that's failing. There are solution people, people who can come up with fixes to problems that you never thought was even fixable. And there are people that just operate from their gut. They operate from their heart and how they feel about things. Now, when you get a really high functioning team, you'll have some representation of most of those different types. Now, when I describe them, if you throw them all into a room, you're going to have a spectacular storming session because you're going to have people that are going to be throwing out ideas, people that are going to be criticizing all of them, somebody stepping in the middle trying to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we could fix this. And other people going, I don't feel that this is in the right direction. And other people going, what the hell are we talking about? Where's the facts behind this? Right? So when you look at that, recognizing that people actually come at the problem and the challenge of the team from very different perspectives means that you have to honor and recognize that and give everybody some space to be able to say what they're saying without dominating the team. And so when you're coming together as a team, I would encourage you to look for some of those differences in the way that the people on the team approach things and find out where there's some potential frictions between how they approach the mission, and find a way for that to be a valuable part of the team discussion instead of a part that just doesn't fit. Is that helpful?
Yeah, for sure. We had our first kickoff meeting this morning, so I can see a couple of those things you're talking about already starting. But no, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you want to know about those different types of styles, there's a book that's been written many years ago, and it's called The Six Thinking Hats by Edward de Bono. So
Yeah, I've heard of that one. Right.
it's a good one, and it still is very true. I use that technique um, to resolve some very large industry-wide problems a few years ago.
Mhm.
Rooms of people with very different perspectives, and the way we did that is to recognize is to go through each one of those different thinking styles as a group. So we generated ideas as a group, and then we criticized all those ideas as a group. And naturally, the people that were idea generators contributed most to one, and people who are good critical thinkers contributed most to the next stage. But it allowed everybody to have a voice.
Yeah. Thank you, Pete.
Yeah, I would have one. First, thank you so much, Pete. My question is about, I think it was point number 4 or 3. It was when you got someone that would not be a good fit usually, but you just got an inspiration. You kind of knew this person. So I'm trying to build a Christian art industry. So there's kind of nothing there. So I have to be really creative of thinking outside the box. So I was just wanting more insights. How did you knew, or how did you got this inspiration that this person would be a fit?
Um, that's a really good question. We always say that, there's a gut feel, but the reality is our gut feels come from um, many years of experience in uh, that kind of develops some subconscious wiring in our minds, I think. So a couple of things that I look for when I'm looking for somebody that has got a lot of potential is that when you talk to them, that they have an aspiration for something more for themselves and for other people. And they really want to contribute to that. I have one client right now that is spending a large chunk of money out of his main business to create something for a sporting area that he is very passionate about, that where people are not treated very well. And he wants to elevate the respect for those kind of athletes and get them in a point where they can be more successful at the thing they love to do, and that he used to love to do when he was a younger man. So when you put somebody like that into a position, they're going to want to learn what they need to learn in order to do the thing that they find meaningful. And so when you're looking for people with potential, I think I'm originally looking for people that have a real sense of drive for a greater meaning, that that the team or the organization has the opportunity to provide a vehicle for them to do that. And that alignment between their passions, their aspirations, the thing that they want to do that's greater, to contribute to something greater than themselves, was probably the biggest thing I look for. And the other thing I look for is you know what has been termed mental agility. So do they have the mental capacity to learn something that is new? And do they have that desire and capability to learn and to grow and to evolve? When Jesus took on his apostles, he didn't say, well, let me go through a job interview here and see what you know about, my father. He said, you know, come and learn. And they all demonstrated a passion and an interest and willing to learn and lead, and they wanted to learn. So that combination of a passion for something to be part of something bigger and better, and to create something beautiful for the world, and the willingness to learn whatever you need to learn to accomplish that, I think, are two things that I keep looking for when I look for potential. Does that make any sense, or is it
Yes,
just too
yes, it
big?
does. Thank you. Thank you for explaining more.
No problem.
Pete, great presentation. It's Ton here. What happens when you're working with a team or a leader that, they recognize the ego or whatever is kind of holding them back, but they're having a tough time changing their ways, if you want to call it. How do you work with them? How do you get them to slowly make that transition to a better way?
Well, there's a couple of things. I'm going to quote, loosely quote, Niccolo Machiavelli from 1526. The most unchristian human being ever probably recorded in history. But what he did is he understood politics and people very well. And he said, never try and undertake a change in the order of things. He said, because the people that like the things the way they are going to become your enemy to it. And he said, and the people that can benefit from something better are only half committed because there's no certainty of success. So when you're trying to move people and change them, it is very difficult. And the key thing to understand there is the equation of the value of that they get from the current order of things against the value of the new order of things. And changing that equation is really looking at the core of the person and how they see value. So, for example, some of the value of staying with where they are is often that they have developed deep understanding and knowledge of the current order, which makes them an expert in it. And moving to something different diminishes potentially that value significantly. And one of the techniques, and that's not the only thing that you look for, but for example, with that one, you'd start to ask yourself, well, how do I change that equation? And one of the ways that I've used to change that equation is to help them to understand the translation of the skills and capabilities and knowledge that they have into something that is extremely valuable in the new order. And so that helps to change that equation in their mind. And the other one is, if I move to the new order, I'm going to have to learn things that I don't know. And can I even do it? And our ego stops us from often moving forward because of failure. As a child, we have no worry about making ourselves look like idiots, but that's how we learn. When you're an adult and you're an esteemed adult, that becomes a different equation. And so the learning process of skill acquisition into the new world has to be one that they believe that they can be successful at. So
Yeah.
understanding that equation and understanding how that individual sees that equation can often provide some insights into how do I change that equation for them.
Yeah. Because I've had it in the other organizations where, they are the way they are, but they're so locked into their position and, I guess, in a place of authority that they can be the way they are, and no one can really change them, even though it's a toxic environment. They're creating a toxic environment because they're so, quote, valuable to the organization.
Exactly.
And so the people who are underneath, like, how do you work with those people when, yeah, there is a better way that can create a better work environment for your employees, but I mean, the person who's creating that toxic environment has to see that there's still value, yeah, there's value in that, or else, you know,
Yeah.
things aren't going to change.
And there is one other technique that was described to me once by a fellow I hired from Ernst & Young who was really good at change management. And but I also recognize that his method really was used all the way back in the New Testament by Jesus Christ in moving the world forward for Christianity. So let me describe it from the Ernst & Young perspective. He says, first of all, you do have to play with this equation and set up the equation correctly. But then the next step, he said, is you have to create, you have to open a window and a door so that they can see a much more beautiful and better world than the room that they're sitting in, and make it very attractive and beautiful. And so if you look at it, Jesus painted a picture of a world that was better than the Roman occupied, Pharisee controlled world that he had walked into. He painted something beautiful. And then I said, well, to the Ernst & Young guy, I said, well, what's the last step? He said, the last step is you douse the room with gasoline and set it on fire. You make it impossible to stay where you are or go back.
I love that. That's awesome. Make it impossible for them to stay where. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And Jesus did the
Yeah.
same thing with the apostles. Once they came out against the Romans and the Pharisees, there was no going back.
Right. Right. And be the influencer rather than the influencee, right? And so if you had a whole room of encouragers, right,
Yeah.
then change the pH level in the room, and then hopefully, yeah.
Dan, you are one quick study. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. And it ties in, with what we were talking about today, Don, this morning at breakfast. You know, the leader that David must have been for those three mighty men to go risk their lives, go get that water for him, right? And then come back, and then he pours it out on the, like, yeah, showing that demonstration of he's one of them. He's not above them. He's right in the trenches with them, and who am I to take this water and be quenched when my guys are suffering? And yeah, but they also showed their leadership quality by doing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks again, Pete, for that excellent presentation. Thanks so much for attending. Look forward to seeing you next month. God bless. Have a great day.